The first whisper of unease was so subtle I mistook it for the hum of the refrigerator. It was a late Tuesday evening, and Liliana, was perched on a stool in the grand, sterile kitchen of the home my husband Julian had designed. The room was a symphony of cold precision, polished concrete floors, sleek Italian cabinetry, a monolithic island of Carrara marble that felt more like an autopsy table than a place for shared meals. I was sketching designs for a new ceramic series, my fingers smudged with charcoal, the only element of soft chaos in the otherwise immaculate space. Julian moved behind me, a phantom in his own home. He placed a glass of red wine next to my elbow, his fingers brushing my neck. "Working late again, my darling?" His voice was a smooth, practiced baritone, the same when he used to charm clients and lull me into a false sense of security. "You're pushing yourself too hard. Your passion is one of your most beautiful qualities, but even the most brilliant kiln can crack if fired too hot." I smiled absently, not looking up from my sketch. "It's just a burst of inspiration, Jules. I'll come to bed soon." He didn't move. I could feel his gaze on me, a weight I had once found comforting and now found assessing. "It's not just the late nights, Liliana," he continued, his tone shifting to one of gentle concern. "You've been so distracted lately. You forgot your lunch with a leaner Vance last week, and the other day you asked me the same question about the quarterly taxes 3 times. He sighed, a sound heavy with manufactured worry. "It's as if your mind is elsewhere. I'm concerned." That was the first official brick laid in the wall he was building around my sanity. At the time, I dismissed it. I was tired. My pottery studio, terracotta dream, was on the cusp of a major breakthrough, and the pressure was immense. But Julian, my handsome, successful architect husband, was my rock, or so I believed. The concern became a campaign. He began scheduling appointments for me with a Dr. Alastair Sterling, a cognitive wellness specialist and stress management expert he'd met at a charity gala. "Just think of him as a trainer for your mind, my love," Julian insisted, his hand resting on my shoulder, a possessive anchor. "He can give you the tools to manage this mental clutter." Dr. Sterling's office was a study in beige tranquility, designed to disarm. He was a man with a calm smile and eyes that held no warmth. Our sessions were a slow, insidious poisoning. He never accused, he only suggested. "Liliana, when you can't find your keys, does it feel like a simple mistake, or does it trigger a deeper sense of dislocation? Or Julian tells me you've been experiencing gaps in your memory. That must be very frightening." He would take copious notes, his pen scratching against the paper like insects skittering in the walls. I would leave feeling more fractured than when I arrived, my own thoughts feeling foreign and suspect. Then, the environment itself began to turn against me. It started with small, inexplicable dislocations of my belongings. My favorite carving tool, a Japanese kana passed down from my grandfather, vanished from my studio. I turned the house upside down in a growing panic, only for Julian to find it days later, safely stored in a box of Christmas decorations in the attic. "You must have put it there for safekeeping and forgotten, my love," he said, his expression a perfect blend of relief and pity. "Dr. Sterling did mention that heightened anxiety can lead to complex compensatory behaviors." The incidents escalated. I would wake in the dead of night, my heart hammering, certain I had heard the front door's electronic lock disengage and the soft sigh of it opening. I'd shake Julian awake, my voice a terrified whisper. "Jules, someone's in the house." He would sigh, pat my arm, and go to check, returning minutes later to report nothing amiss. "It was a dream, Liliana, or the house settling. You need to rest." The most terrifying event occurred one evening when I was home alone. I was reading in the living room when a faint, sweet, and unmistakable odor began to permeate the air. Gas. My blood ran cold. I raced to the kitchen, but all the stove knobs were off. I checked the fireplace. It was electric. The smell grew stronger, cloying. I called Julian, my voice trembling. He was home in 10 minutes, his face a mask of calm efficiency. He walked through the house, sniffing the air. "I don't smell anything, darling. Nothing at all." He opened the windows. "It's probably just something from the garden. Or," he paused, looking at me with profound sympathy, "sometimes the mind can manifest physical sensations under extreme stress. Phantasmia, I think Dr. Sterling called it." That was the moment the ground truly gave way beneath me. If I could not trust my own nose, what could I trust? The gaslighting was complete. I was adrift in a sea of my own perceived unreliability, and Julian was my only lighthouse, a beacon that was, in reality, leading me onto the rocks. The final stage of his plan was set in motion with a business trip. He announced he had to travel to the coast for 3 days for a project groundbreaking. "I've asked Beatrice to stay with you," he said, referring to his kind-hearted, impressionable sister. "I can't bear the thought of you being here alone, not with your recent episodes." The kiss he pressed to my forehead felt like a seal on my tomb. The moment his car disappeared, a terrifying electric clarity jolted through my system. The fog of doubt that had been my constant companion for months didn't just lift, it evaporated in the heat of a sudden, horrifying realization. The narrative was too perfect. The forgetful wife, the concerned husband, the supportive doctor, the episodes. It was a script, and I was the only actor who didn't have my lines. That night, with Beatrice sleeping soundly downstairs, I was a woman possessed. I needed to get into Julian's study, his inner sanctum, a room he kept locked with a key he always carried. I remembered our first anniversary, a gift he'd given me, a beautiful leather-bound, hollowed-out copy of Pride and Prejudice. A romantic gesture, he'd said, to hold our secrets. My hands shook as I retrieved it from the shelf, my fingers fumbling as I pried open the false pages. Inside, nestled in the hollowed-out cavity, was a single, cold, silver key. The lock to his study turned with a soft, damning click. The room was a temple to his ego, awards on the wall, architectural models under glass. I sat at his monolithic desk, the leather chair groaning under my weight. I booted up his computer, my heart a frantic, wild thing in my chest. The password was my birthday, a detail so cliché it was insulting. I began to dig. I found a folder, innocuously labeled Property Tax Archives. Inside was not municipal paperwork, but the blueprints of my annihilation. There was a log, a digital diary chronicling my descent. Entries, written in Julian's detached, professional prose, detailed paranoid episodes where I had allegedly accused him of poisoning my tea, frantic spending sprees, where I'd supposedly maxed out credit cards on nonsensical items, and late-night ramblings where I'd expressed a fear of shadowy figures in the garden. All of it was fiction, crafted with a chilling attention to detail. Next were the emails to Dr. Sterling. Julian, the devoted husband, reporting my decline with feigned heartbreak, weaving the threads of his lies into a believable clinical tapestry. "Her memory lapses are becoming more frequent," one read. "She became agitated yesterday when I asked about her studio's finances. I'm fearful for her safety and her stability." Then, the financial documents. Spreadsheets and bank statements showing a slow, deliberate siphon of our substantial joint savings. Thousands of dollars, transferred over months into offshore accounts and shell corporations with names I didn't recognize. He wasn't just building a case against my mind. He was looting our shared life. And then I found it, the file that made the blood freeze in my veins. Draft Contingency Plan LK, PDF. It was a fully formulated petition for an involuntary psychiatric hold. It cited the fabricated log, the expert testimony from Dr. Sterling, and my demonstrated financial incompetence as grounds for having me committed to the Willows, a private, high-security psychiatric facility, for an indeterminate period of evaluation and treatment. Attached was a draft letter on Sterling's letterhead, enthusiastically endorsing this course of action. I sat back, the world tilting on its axis. This wasn't a plan for divorce. It was a plan for eradication. He wasn't just going to leave me. He was going to have me declared legally insane, locked away in a place from which people like me, wealthy, inconvenient wives, often never returned. He would get everything, the house, my successful business, every last dollar, and my silence would be guaranteed by heavy medication and impenetrable walls. I was staring at a life sentence for a crime I didn't commit, and the man I had loved and trusted was the architect of my prison. A coldness, sharp and absolute, settled deep within my core, smothering the panic. The fear was still there, a screaming chorus in the back of my mind, but it was now a distant thing. He had shown me his hand. He thought I was a broken piece on his chessboard. He had no idea he had just handed the queen her sword. The game was far from over, but the player had changed. The following 48 hours were a masterclass in psychological warfare, fought behind a mask of docile fragility. I became Liliana the Unwell, a role I performed with an Oscar-worthy dedication that made my soul ache. I spoke to Beatrice in a soft, hesitant voice, my sentences often trailing off as if I'd lost my train of thought. "The days just seem to blur together, Bea," I'd confess over tea, my hands trembling slightly around the china cup. "Julian says it's the stress, but it feels like I'm disappearing." Her eyes would well with genuine, misplaced compassion, and she would pat my hand, assuring me that her brother only wanted what was best. She was a sweet, gullible pawn, and the guilt of using her was a bitter pill I forced myself to swallow. Beneath the performance, I was a general marshalling her forces. On a cheap, prepaid phone, I conducted my research. I wasn't looking for a divorce lawyer, I was looking for a siege engine. I found her in a leaner Vance, a woman whose reputation was built on the smoldering ruins of predatory men's lives. Her website was stark, her bio a list of battles won against fraud and coercion. In a soundproofed conference room that smelled of lemon polish and cold ambition, I laid my nightmare on the polished table between us. I showed her the printed logs, the emails, the financial records, and the petition. Elinor listened without a single interruption, her sharp, intelligent eyes missing nothing. When I finished, the silence was profound. She leaned forward, steepling her fingers. "Liliana," she said, her voice low and devoid of all pity, filled only with a cold, focused fury. "This is one of the most coldly sophisticated schemes for spousal annihilation I have ever encountered. We will not be seeking a settlement. We will be building a case for criminal conspiracy, fraud, and attempted malicious imprisonment. But to do that, we need a fortress of evidence, not just a shield. We need to prove intent beyond a shadow of a doubt." And so, I turned my beautiful, treacherous home into a stage for my own counterintelligence operation. I became a spy in the House of Love, a phantom in my own life. I purchased a state-of-the-art, pinhole camera disguised as a sleek, black USB charger, and placed it on a bookshelf in the living room, its lens offering a perfect, wide-angle view of Julian's favorite armchair. I sewed a tiny, voice-activated digital recorder into the collar of my favorite cashmere sweater. Every conversation was now potential ammunition. I continued my sessions with Dr. Sterling, but now I was the puppeteer. I would guide our conversations with a feigned vulnerability that hid a core of steel. "Dr. Sterling," I'd ask, my eyes wide with manufactured fear, "when you say my memory is deteriorating, does that mean I could become a danger to myself? Is that why Julian is so worried?" I would lead him to reiterate his false diagnoses, to cement his professional opinion on the digital record, creating the very noose he intended for my neck. Concurrently, I hired a private investigator. Frank was a man in his late 50s, with the weary eyes of a bloodhound who had seen every flavor of human deceit. We met in the back booth of a diner that smelled of stale coffee and grease. "I need a full forensic workup on my husband, Julian Reed," I told him, sliding a folder containing his photo and routines across the sticky formica. "And I need you to perform an archaeological dig on the life of one Dr. Alastair Sterling. I want to know what he had for breakfast 10 years ago." The wait for Frank's report was an agony. Julian returned from his business trip tanned and infuriatingly relaxed. He was playing the part of the devoted husband perfectly, his solicitousness a constant, grating reminder of his duplicity. "You look tired, my love," he'd say, his hand on my shoulder feeling like a spider. "Maybe you should cut back on your studio hours. Your health is the most important thing." I would smile, a brittle, fragile thing, and nod, all the while feeling the hidden recorder against my skin, a silent witness to his treachery. When Frank's report finally arrived, it was a thing of brutal, beautiful poetry. Julian's trip had not been to a coastal construction site. He had been at a secluded, 5-star mountain resort. And he had not been alone. The photos were a series of visceral blows, Julian laughing by a fireplace, his arm draped around a willowy blonde, the two of them sharing a kiss in a hot tub, the woman, who Frank identified as a junior architect from his firm, feeding him a strawberry. The intimacy of the images was a desecration of our marriage, a physical proof of the lie I was living. But But the true masterpiece of the report, the twist that transformed my cold resolve into a burning, vengeful fire, was the dossier on the good doctor. Dr. Alastair Sterling was a phantom. His real name was Alastair Finch. He had no medical license. His degree was from a known diploma mill in the Caribbean that had been shut down by the FBI. He had a rap sheet that included fraud, forgery, and a 2-year stint in a minimum security prison for a real estate scam. Julian hadn't just found a compliant therapist. He had hired a career criminal to act as the medical cornerstone of his plan to have me institutionalized. The sheer, calculated evil of it took my breath away. I held the final, incontrovertible pieces of the puzzle. I had the fake doctor, the secret mistress, the financial scheming, and the damning petition. Julian had constructed an elaborate prison for my mind, but in his arrogance, he had left the blueprints in plain sight. I was now the architect, and his freedom was the structure I intended to demolish. The final confrontation was not a dramatic, shouting match. It was a quiet, surgical strike. The morning after I received Frank's report, as Julian sat at the kitchen island, sipping his single-origin coffee and scrolling through financial news on his tablet, there was a firm, authoritative knock on the door. I answered it to find 2 stern-faced men in navy suits and my lawyer, Eleanor Vance, a formidable presence in a sharp black suit. "Julian Reed," the lead man said, flashing a badge from the State Medical Board. "We need to speak with you regarding your collaboration with Alastair Finch, also known as Dr. Sterling, who was taken into custody last night on charges of practicing medicine without a license, fraud, and conspiracy." The color drained from Julian's face so completely he looked like a marble statue. His coffee cup rattled violently in its saucer. His eyes, wide with sheer, undiluted panic, shot to me. In that moment, he didn't see his fragile wife. He saw his executioner. The mask was off, and the terrified, cornered man beneath was laid bare. In Eleanor's office later that day, she was a queen holding court. She laid out the evidence with the dispassionate precision of a surgeon wielding a scalpel. "We have Finch's signed confession, nomming you as his co-conspirator. We have the financial records of your payments to him. We have the petition for commitment you drafted. We have video and audio of you discussing this scheme. And we have evidence of your affair, which demonstrates a clear motive." She paused, letting the weight of it all crush him. "Liliana is prepared to press full criminal charges. The district attorney is very, very interested." Julian's lawyer, a flustered man who had clearly been blindsided, whispered frantically in his ear. Julian's arrogance had shattered, replaced by the raw terror of a man facing the loss of his liberty, his reputation, everything. You can't," he stammered, his voice a broken thing. "I have everything, Julian," I said, my voice calm and clear, echoing in the tense silence of the room. "You tried to steal my mind, my freedom, my very life. You wanted me to disappear. Now the world is going to see you for the monster you truly are." The divorce was the swiftest, most one-sided proceeding Eleanor said she had ever witnessed. To avoid a public, humiliating criminal trial that would have guaranteed him a prison sentence, Julian capitulated completely. He signed over the house, the cars, every single asset. He agreed to a massive, lump-sum financial settlement for the emotional distress and financial theft. My business was mine, free and clear. Most importantly, he signed a detailed, legally binding confession, admitting to the entire, sordid plot in exchange for me not pressing charges. The scandal eviscerated him. His firm collapsed within weeks, his reputation was a smoking ruin, and he became a ghost in the city that had once celebrated him. Now, the silence in my home is a peaceful one. I had the cold, minimalist aesthetic Julian had imposed stripped away. The walls are now a warm terracotta, filled with my vibrant artwork and the lush green of hanging plants. His sterile study is my sun-drenched pottery studio, the scent of clay and creative chaos a permanent perfume. The man who tried to have me declared insane is now the one living in a state of exile, his life defined by the confession that keeps him out of jail but locks him in perpetual disgrace. He thought my mind was a delicate porcelain vase he could shatter with a tap. He was wrong. He placed me in the kiln of his betrayal, a fire he stoked with lies and manipulation. But he underestimated the material. I was not porcelain. I was raw, primal clay, and I emerged from the inferno not shattered, but transformed, hardened, glazed in my own resilience, and forged into something unbreakably strong and more beautiful than he could ever have imagined. He sought to bury me in darkness. Instead, I rose, a phoenix from the ashes of his deceit, and I made sure the door to that old life was sealed shut forever.